Welcome to Doc NYC Live. I'm Tom Powers, the festival's artistic director. Our festival officially ended earlier this month, but our year-round programming continues. We'll soon be announcing the winter season of our Doc NYC Pro panels that run from January to March. Those panels contain invaluable insights into all aspects of documentary filmmaking from leading practitioners. Look to our website in the coming week for more information. Now, on today's panel, each year the Doc NYC picks our short lists of 12 short documentaries and 15 features that we think are among the year's best. Yesterday, we held 3 conversations with short film directors that you can watch recorded on our Facebook page. Today, I'm talking to the directors of the 15 shortlist features spread over 4 conversations. This day is co-presented by MTV Documentary Films. We've been holding these shortlist discussions for several years, and it's become one of my favorite days of the year to have so many great filmmakers gathered all at once. We've grouped these films into 4 categories. So later at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll be talking about 4 films that are investigations. At 2:30, we'll talk about 4 films that highlight change makers. And finally, at 4 p.m., we'll focus on 4 films practicing the art of observation. I hope you can watch those live or catch them later as recordings. Our first conversation today, we're calling Poetry in Motion. We're talking about 3 films that stand apart for the poetry of their expression. Now I'm going to ask the directors to turn on their cameras and come to our virtual stage. We'll give a quick introduction to these 3 great directors. I'll start with Kirsten Johnson, whose new film is Dick Johnson is Dead, now playing on Netflix. That film focuses on her father, Dick, who's represented right next to Kirsten there, during a period when he was starting to lose his memory and show increasing signs of his mortality. Kirsten enlists him to film playful scenarios that imagine his death by different gruesome accidents, like falling down the stairs. The film becomes a meditation on death while also rejoicing in the pleasures of being alive. Kirsten was previously on the Doc NYC shortlist with her film Camera Person, and she's been a frequent speaker on our pro panels. And I'm going to turn to Garrett Bradley, who directed Time, that won the Sundance Directing Prize this year and is available on Amazon. Time follows a woman named Fox Rich, who spends 20 years trying to get her husband freed from prison. Garrett followed Fox for several months and also draws upon footage that Fox videotaped herself over 2 decades. 2 years ago, Garrett was on Doc NYC's inaugural 40 Under 40 list that showcases young talent. She was also recently my guest on the Pure Nonfiction podcast. And right now she's got a film installation at the Museum of Modern Art in New York that runs through March. We'll post links to those things in our comments section. Finally, joining us from Berlin, so we got 3 time zones here. Kirsten's on the East Coast, Garrett's on the West Coast, and Victor is in Europe. His new film is GUNDA. In GUNDA, he's filming the world from the perspective of farm animals, including a mother pig named Gunda, a one-legged chicken, and a cow, all gorgeously photographed in black and white with no humans on camera. The film is distributed in the US by Neon and opens today for a 1-week virtual engagement at New York's Film Forum. Last year, Victor's film Aquarella, that was a meditation on water, was named to the Oscars documentary shortlist. As I was thinking about this conversation today, I turned to an essay that Victor once wrote called The 10 Rules of Documentary. And I'll post a link. Well, I won't post a link, but someone on my team will post a link in the comments section to Victor's 10 Rules of Documentary that makes for great reading. And I'm going to touch upon a few of these rules and kind of throw them out for conversation here. So one of Victor's rules is, he says, don't film if you want to say something. Just say it or write it. Film only if you want to show something or you want people to see something. Kirsten, let me start with you. When you were making Dick Johnson is Dead about your father, I wonder how this statement reflects for you.
Well, first of all, can I just say, Tom, right on that you're having these conversations, small conversations with us filmmakers. And I'm kind of insanely honored to be here with Garrett and Vincent, who I've never met you. Did I just say Vincent? I think I said Vincent.
You got it. Victor. Yeah.
It's Victor. We haven't met. I don't even know how to say your name right yet. But Victor and Garrett, who I do know and love and respect, it's just really powerful for me to be in your company and in the company of your films, which I think are both stupendous. So glad to be here with you all. And listen, I love making lists. I love breaking rules. I love all of the tools that cinema give us. And I love the different ways people use the tools. That is my response.
Actually, Tom, I originally it was not rules. It was 10 advices to the beginners. So the IDFA asked me to write. They say, "Oh, we have many students. They want to talk to you, but what are you gonna talk about? Can you write something before you're gonna talk to them?" And I was in an airplane, and I said, "Okay, I will give 10 advices to beginners." And it was just like this. It was very easy. While my flight to Amsterdam, I just wrote them without thinking much. And now it became rules and became everywhere, and became like statement. It was not like this. It was just simple. And I like what you just said. I have my own rules. This is actually rule number 10. Don't listen to me. Just forget it. Just do your things. And by the way, Tom, I very like, I always jealous to programmers. I always think, fuck, filmmaker is so narrow thinking person. Filmmaker is always like, oh, this is my way of doing things, the rest is wrong. And programmers, I always jealous how guys you can combine things which are totally opposite to each other in aesthetic and everything, in like understanding of cinema and everything. I always say, wow, these guys are more clever than filmmakers, because you are able to combine totally different people and respect all of them and present films of each other, which is a beautiful job you do. One last comment about beginning. If we need to say that we created this, the last year specifically, we created an unbelievable community in documentary, which was not like this before. Like 20 years ago, it was not like this. And I would say now what we're capable to do, we are not only sharing ideas together, we managed to co-produce big movies together. We co-produce, talk to each other. We managed to talk to each other. We managed to respect each other. And this is like huge achievement. I hope we will not lose it, not only through pandemic, but generally. I was filming different society, different group of people, and I never seen such nice people in the documentary world. We know each other for so long, and we still like each other. When we meet each other, like once a year somewhere, or 2 times a year, like few times in 5 years, once in the 5 or 3 years, we still like to meet each other. We still like to hug each other. It's so amazing. People 25, 30 years, and you still like them. And what is magic of the life? We are getting older together, which is privilege to get older and still love people you were young together. So thank you for this opportunity to talk together. And yeah, I like the fact that you are bringing people totally different aesthetic It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be in this table.
Well, no film festival programmer can do their work without filmmakers. I spent 10 years as a filmmaker. I know how hard that work is. So we all owe you a debt of gratitude. Garrett, let me bring you into this. And I want to go back to that statement of Victor's. If you want to make a film, don't say something, just say it or write it. And in your film Time, there is a lot of things for us to take away about America's prison industrial complex and its effects on over 2 million families that have someone in prison these days. But it's not a didactic film. There'd be many different ways of approaching it. So I wonder what you think when I read Victor's quote about film only if you want to show something or if you want people to see something.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny, I'm smiling because there's just so many just like it's a Pandora's box in the most beautiful way, you know.
Let's fight.
Yeah, no, I think like there's like over the summer in the States, and we had these incredible protests that were happening. And it was really, to a certain extent, I think, speaking to the role that images and that optics play in holding systems accountable, which we have done, I think, for many, many years, at least from an American perspective, and in that context, specifically around white supremacy. You go back to Emmett Till's mother, for instance, right, and the importance of the image. But I think that it also right now illuminates the absence of images when we are thinking about the prison industrial complex. When we're thinking about 2.3 million people being incarcerated, that's something that people can read. That's something people can understand on a sort of factual basis. But it also, to a certain extent, becomes relatively abstract. And so image making, I think, in this way is a very critical form of resistance, because the erasure of the population is done by design. So I think that whether it's photography, whether it's documentary film, whether it's even scripted film, I think we need to create more of a presence for communities and for issues that are purposefully erased or made less visible. So I think for me, that was a really key part of why it was important to make a film, you know?
When I hear Garrett talk about trying to film the invisible, Kirsten, I think about Dick Johnson Is Dead. You're trying to film things like what the afterlife might be like for your father. I wonder if you can pick up on that and talk about what you were trying to visualize in Dick Johnson Is Dead that would otherwise be invisible.
Well, I mean, I was ready to jump right in with Garrett because, I think the dilemma of how invisible mass incarceration has been in our country and how like insidious white supremacy is in our country, like takes all kinds of strategies that are, visual strategies, intellectual strategies, like pushing the filmmaking craft to do different things. The first film I ever made in 1999 was about mass incarceration. And in some ways, I got that something needed to be spoken about, but the language I used to do it was not yet my own. And that film doesn't live on in people's imagination. It does for the people who are in the film. It does, for the many families of people who are portrayed in the film, many of whom were teenagers when I filmed them, who are all now dead. And this is one of the things, like what I think about, like that films do. And what I thought about heading into the film with my father is like, films, they're engaged with loss because they're engaged with time. And I can tell you, like when I saw that Garrett's film was named Time, I was like, yes, finally someone has named a film Time. Like it's such
No shame. First time.
And
Exactly.
it's such a brilliant, I mean, it's the right subject matter, the right people for the name. And but it was such a victory because cinema is time. And you know, when a camera comes into the room, the future comes into the room. So that the fact that we are recording now, Tom, one of us in this group of people will die first. And we don't know when that's going to happen. Or we might all die.
Got it.
We might all die together in some crazy plane crash, right? But this recording of us, it might be one of our last recordings. It might be one of our last words. So in this like sort of like, how do we make our expression matter? We all struggle with this, right? And then we who are filmmakers, we struggle with the loss that we encounter when we film people, even if it is like the imagination of them being gone. The imagination of my mother behind me is now an image. My father is an image, but they're here, right? The image brings them here. If these images weren't here, I could talk about my father, but you wouldn't be looking at him, right? And so, you know, like Victor was stating, one of the things that cinema does is allows us to see. And when you have things like white supremacy that is hiding in plain sight, so much so that we didn't use those words. Some of us did because we were like being like stepped on the neck by it. And then some of us were like, oh, there's systematic racism. Like that's what I was saying 10 years ago. I wasn't saying white supremacy. I now say white supremacy. And it's like, this is how we help each other learn, right? And like what Victor was saying about us as filmmakers, we get inspired by each other. We aspire to each other and each other's films, but we're also trying to figure out our own language. And we make mistakes in our language as we try to make things. So I said Vincent, and you know why I said that? Because we say his last name. He is a master. We don't call Garrett Bradley. We don't call me Johnson. We all know what we call you, Victor. I don't have practice saying your first name because you have been named a master, right? And now we all know like master classes are done, Tom. None of us are doing master classes anymore, right? So we're thinking about language and how language is a part of this cinema language. I'm gonna stop there.
Can I jump? Because you said we didn't meet and didn't meet each other, but in fact, I noticed a few times we are very, very close. Because, for example, I made a movie, no one have seen it, so I cannot suspect you stole my idea because no one has seen this film. It was my first film. Actually, everybody thinks my first film is The Bellows, but in fact, before Bellows, I made another movie called Losif. It's about a philosopher who was 94 years old. And he actually, when I came to him, no one knew him, no one saw his face. And my idea was to show his face to people because, in my opinion, he is the level of Dostoevsky, but in 20th century. He's the greatest philosopher of Russian culture, and no one ever see his face. I came to film him. But he said to me, I'm going to die 24th of May. So, and he actually died 24th of May. But when he said it to me in February, I protested, like, why you need to die? What is the reason to die? And he started talking to me, explaining why he has to die. And his wife was staying close to him. And she was kind of making like this, kind of, yeah, Victor, he's right. He has to die. And I was protesting why we have to die. What is the reason for us to die? And she was, Victor, you are so young. She listen, the philosopher, he's explaining me why we have to die. But what happened next? He actually died 24th of May. And I started film his funeral. And his wife was not agree with his death. She was disagree. She was crying nonstop. And I put on this image when she was close to his body, looking to his coffin with his body, She looks at him, and I put his voice, telling to her, I have to die. Don't worry. This is the rules of life. But she's crying. And he explained to her, no, it's fine. Don't worry. This is the way it's supposed to be. Yeah, this is what I made when I was a student. And then I made Belovs, and everybody thinks it's my first film.
Everybody thinks Camera Person is my first film too, by the way. I think and could we even name our first films? But oh my God, I can't wait to see that scene. Right. And it's like, I haven't seen your movie, but I am inspired by it. And this is what I love about time in relationship to our encounters with filmmaking. It often happens that we find these like simpatico things, even though we are not, like when I saw Time and I saw that Fox had created a life-sized image of Rob, I freaked out. It was like we had entered the time-space continuum together around like, let's carry our loved ones around on a stick, right? Like it, so I think this happens in cinema all the time, that we sort of time travel through each other's movies. But please tell me the name of the philosopher again, because I want to know.
Lossev, Alexei Lossev, L-O-S-E-V, Lossev.
I can't wait to see it.
F. Lossev in the end. He is really great. He was in Stalin Gulag. But actually, if we come back to the...
Well, actually, Victor, before I bring that, I want to bring Garrett back into... Garrett, did you have something to say?
No, I'm like so happy here. No.
Okay, Victor, go ahead with what you had to say, and then I'm going to...
I just said the film Time is a kind of risky title, right? And when I started watching it, I was a little bit disappointed in the first 1 minute. Like I said, oh, it's like aesthetic. But when it's grow, I realized, wow, it shows me something I never seen before. This is actually interesting that it's my biggest question, why cinema documentary exists. We know why, we can say differently why fiction exists, but why documentary exists, why it generally exists. And why I was insisting that it's not tell story, but show something, maybe story, but not necessary. I wanted to say that cinema documentary can show you something you normally, or you don't want to see, or you're not able to see, or you decided not to see. These three way of seeing and not seeing. And when I saw film Time, my first reaction was, I don't want to see. But then I realized, wow, it shows me something. It does. And I was stuck, and I started to watch it. And it gave me this exactly what I said. We don't want to see something, but documentary can say, no. Do it, watch it. It's like, again, it's like Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky sometimes uses technology. He say to you, you read his lines and you say, oh, it's a little bit boring. He say to you in that moment when you feel it's boring, he said to you, I know it's boring, but read next line. Like, bam, you're shocked. How he knew that what you feel now. He knew it. So thank you very much for both of you for your beautiful films.
Yeah.
I mean, this is it, right? The setup and the reveal, the pleasure that one feels when one feels the boredom and then has it land that he knows you were feeling that. It's like, then you have community.
Yeah, there's also, it's funny because you do bring a good question of just like why we even make films. And I to me, I'm still kind of in awe, like we're these species on a planet and we've figured out a way, somehow it's been important for us to understand ourselves, like to understand everything. And I feel like the camera and filmmaking has been this attempt for us, this sort of self-documentation that sometimes plays as either a mirror or a window, you know what I mean? And I think both can be powerful. I think that scripted and narrative filmmaking exists in a space that is aspirational. And I think that, you know, and I'm going to sound naive for a second, but I do feel like maybe documentary filmmaking is also in a place where it's showing people that we don't have to script things for them to be aspirational, like that those things also exist in the real world, and we're finding ways to sort of prove that to a certain extent, you know?
Tom, I suspect you made something against me. I suddenly feel I'm old-fashioned filmmaker, you know? They have revolutionary form, revolutionary ideas, and I'm with my GUNDA, kind of traditional classic documentary black and white. Suddenly, so
No, your Gunda is like it's allowing us to wish to be with the tiny pigs, which is not a wish we knew we had, right? Like let me be down there, let me touch that tiny pig, let me nestle in there with that little pig, and the light that you allowed to like sort of wrap around those tiny pigs, it's you know, I mean, I think like you know, Garrett and I have talked about this a lot, like that there are not enough images in the world of African American people loving each other, that we are oversaturated with the images of violence that is done to Black bodies, but we haven't seen the love, and we have not seen the love of pigs, right? Like the love of pigs that's new territory. And it calls into all kinds of questions of like, oh, really? We're raising these little cuties so that we can eat them? Like, you know, those questions are raised by the loving way in which you film them, right? And it is a new way of seeing, because we're seeing, you know, I mean, for me, it's the chicken with its head cut off, still alive, is like, you know, the hallelujah moment, like how loud I laughed in this moment. I wish I could share with you. but I mean, you know, sort of back to Garrett and like, why are we doing this? What is compelling us? And I think about like our human struggle with memory and how we sort of construct ourselves and our world in relation to memories that we can't hold on to, but that we feel in some way. And so like, you know, there's a way in which all of us at this point in history understand our ancestors are with us and in our bodies, but to imagine who our ancestors were, to sort of create hallucinations of them through cinema, is to discover ourselves. And so I mean, that was one of the things that happened to me through my mother's Alzheimer's, is that I learned that my own memory was deeply unreliable. And her, in her state of Alzheimer's, just sort of like wrote over the memory that I had of her as a lucid person. And I was so devastated by the loss of my own memory. And I knew my memory was capable of failing me. And so that was part of what took me into Camera Person, let me go back into this evidence I have of this visual evidence of what I experienced, and see how my memory lines up with it or doesn't line up with it. And of course, it was just like revelation after revelation about the sort of fragmentariness of both what I had filmed and what I remembered. But in the making of that, we brought my mother back to life. Nels Bangerter cut a shot of my mother's ashes, and then he cut a shot of my mom alive. And for a second, I was like, oh, she's alive. And that feeling was what like inspired me in some ways to say like, okay, can I do this experiment? And Garrett, like when you say like, why do we make films? I was like, it was okay with me if it wasn't ever going to be a movie. I aspired to it being a movie, but what I wanted was the process with my father and the process with my collaborators and the knowledge that then we would have some evidence of what we had experienced and imagined together.
Yeah, and I think that that's just as powerful as something that's aspirational. Like that in and of itself is aspirational. Like, and we go back all the way to the beginning where, you know, the Lumiere brothers or whatever, just like going all over the world and documenting. There was a reason why they were documenting. They were trying to understand themselves, understand something they didn't know. yes, there were so many other problems that were then funneled into that process. But at the end of the day, it is an attempt to try to understand why we're here, you know, and what we are. And
But can I ask you, all of you, including Tom, why we are so slow?
yeah,
Why
because we're not that smart, I think. That's
we still did not decide what we do with our, what we do, why we still discussing all this, why human did not, so 200 years ago, in your country, in my country, was slavery, right? It was slavery. So when greatest Russian writers were writing novels, half of them they have slaves at home. So they were writing great novels, but they have like 300, 500 slaves just in the window making bread for them. So how we so slow? I don't understand. What was, how it's so difficult to understand that slavery is wrong or racism is wrong? Why are we so slow to understand all of this? Why are we so slow to understand, for example, that to kill animal is same as to kill human, and to mistreat animal, to prison animal, to inseminate artificially, it's the same as to have slaves. Why are we still so fucking, sorry, why are we so slow? I don't understand. Why we still don't understand what to do, nice way, have to nice way to die, and have to, we still, so 100,000 years being in the planet, we still don't know how to handle fundamental things. And all three films are raising this. I don't know, it's just amazing how people are slow. I don't understand. Imagine even 50 years, 70 years ago, in the place I was, I can see here, I can see from my place, I'm on the hill, and I can see the huge airport when it was huge Nazi parade. So it was just 70 years ago. Okay, 80. Come on. And it's like, and the next building, they were making, they were killing people. So it's absurd. We are, how it possible that it's just around corner until at least we don't kill by millions this time. Now we were doing it by dozens of millions. We were doing killing people last century. Now we start kill by dozens of billions. We start killing animals. What the fuck we always do? Why we always need to kill someone?
Garrett, you want to take that?
oh yeah, easy peasy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can say briefly, like, I was rereading Bury My Heart at the Wounded Knee recently, and it's just so beautifully written. And, you know, I mean, I learned this in school, but it wasn't written. I mean, I obviously, not to the extent that I was reading it in. And there's this question that you're asking has also been really circulating in my mind, because the question is like, when Christopher Columbus, you know, came into the cove on the island that's now Dominican Republic and Haiti, right? And this idea of him needing to please his patronage, to get what he could get so that he could continue to do what he wanted to do. For me, the big question is, why didn't you just ask? Why didn't he just ask? Why couldn't he find a way? Why couldn't he use his imagination to think of how can we work together? You know what I mean? And I think that's because it only probably benefited one person, and he probably knew that. And so he went about doing these terrible things that then set the tone for and created a methodology which has shaped all of the Americas, you know? And I don't know, like, where does that come from? Like, what is that instinct that you must take through brutality? You know what I mean? Like, what is that instinct, as opposed to asking, as opposed to seeing if there's another way first? I think that's a question that I don't know if we have, as a human
Mm.
you know, or
Well,
what.
let me try to pivot this back to your films.
Oh, come on, Tom. We're like getting to the heart of the matter, man.
Well, I mean, we're talking about big questions. We're talking
Or
about
not to be, Tom, to be or not to be. Enough. Less and less.
Where do you want us to go, Tom? We'll go there.
we're talking about big questions of ethics here, and to go back to something that Victor wrote in his 10 rules, he says, documentary is the only art where every aesthetical element is almost always has ethical aspects, and every ethical aspect can also be used aesthetically. And I mean, Garrett, maybe I can ask you, because in Time, I see ways in which the ethics and the aesthetics of that film are tightly interwoven. And I wonder if you see that, or if you could reflect on that, the way the ethics and aesthetics of your filmmaking are interwoven.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like images, films, they exist in us like memories, and I think memories become facts in our mind, in our body. And so the ones that we're creating, the images that we're creating, we are offering facts to people. And so for me, there's a lot of responsibility with that, but not in a way that is about propaganda. I'm really invested in beauty. I'm invested in beauty being just as a powerful form of resistance and activism as a revealing of the trauma that exists around that as well. And I think looking up at people, I think leaning into how people present themselves and move into the world, to me, is really important. I think sometimes we tend to, and I'm curious how you all feel about this, but I think we have a little bit of this preconceived notion that trauma or violence or giving up, breaking down, being vulnerable is somehow more true than our strength, than our victories, than seeing us move through the world as powerful beings, that somehow those two things, one is true and one is not true. And I think with Time, it was really important for me to, I mean, we actually filmed for several, I think it was over a year. And, again, I didn't know that any of Fox's archive existed. I had completely constructed this film based on what I thought I knew. And I knew in that moment that leaning into the way in which Fox presented herself, the way in which the family presented themselves to the world, was the truth that I was invested in. I didn't need to get around that. I didn't need to be behind them to make it more real for anybody. So, and I think that the archive, then being able to incorporate that, certainly presents something that is holistic, something that's 360 degrees, something that shows a true evolution of a family's life in a way that is very difficult to do in two-dimensional space, one frame at a time. But I think the ethics for me really, really lean into who is this beautiful person that I see, or this circumstance that I see? How do I strike a balance between my own observation and how they see themselves and how they want to move through the world? And finding a bridge between those two things,
My dad always says, the eyes are dry, the organs cry. And when the eyes are dry, the organs cry. And it wasn't anything like that I understood consciously for a long time, but I think one of the things that I've been really like deeply interested in as a human being is other people's eyes. And having been a camera person for 30 years, like, the camera allows you to go deep into people's eyes. I mean, just like you did, like, to go into GUNDA's eyes is to go into a consciousness. But when you're going into someone's eyes from the outside, you are reading emotions, but you are also projecting emotions. You actually have no idea what's going on the inside, right? And tears are sometimes a clue, yes, something is happening, right? Which I think is in so many ways like why so many of us have like the experience of filming someone crying is like, oh, you know, I'm getting in, right? Because something is coming out from the inside. So I think in some ways that's our attachment to tears, and in some ways, like, you know, tears are so in so many different cultures, tears have been held in because survival is necessary. But, you know, I think like your act of resistance, Garrett, to in some ways show the idealized self, the idealized family, when what that family is up against is the vilification of their family, the criminalization of their family, you know, the destruction of their family. So that becomes, you are elevating that idealization, right, in a certain way through your beauty. And I think for me, like the challenge and the thing that interests me, and sort of to go back to your question, Victor, around like, why are we so slow? We know that other people's pain sometimes gives us pleasure. We know that. We experience that in our personal relationships. And we are mysteries to ourselves. Why did I just hurt that person I love? Why? I didn't want to, but I did it out of my own need, right? And then to sort of investigate, like, where's that need coming from? So, I mean, I think like when we ask these questions about the world and societies and systems and genocides, it's also like, we just got to like look at our own blind spots and be like, wow, complicit, mistake maker, injurer, as well as traumatized, injured, loving, blah, 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 all the things we are, right? And that's sort of what I find so extraordinary about documentary, is that like sometimes we get to see the contradictions. And I think in both of your films, the contradictions exist in the world. We're killing cows, pigs, chickens. We all are eating them. You don't need to tell us that in the movie. Same with Garrett's movie, right?
Tom didn't read the last line of this. It's written, maybe nice people shouldn't be filmmaking documentary.
Oh, come on.
You though.
Talking about,
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. Well, I just want to know, like, for you, like, I mean, just quickly, working with your father, you know, I mean, were there moments where you were like, okay, where's the boundary? Like, what's the ethical, like, what was that process like for you?
All the time, every moment, every day. Like, you know, when I had this dream that a man was in a casket and he sat up and he said, I'm Dick Johnson, I'm not dead yet. And I didn't recognize this man, but I was like, oh, right, I'm running out of time. But then, I had this idea, we're going to do the fake funeral, but by the time we got the money to do the film, I was like, oh my God, my dad totally has dementia. And I know what dementia is. And I had affirmed to myself, I wanted to collaborate with him. I wanted to make it with him, not about him, that we were doing it together. It was about our capacities to imagine together. And so, I was like, this is wrong. You cannot make a film with you cannot fully collaborate with a person who has dementia. And then I said to myself, but can you? Right? And the contradictions that a person with dementia is presenting all the time. So sometimes so I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to make my dad do anything he doesn't want to do. And my dad was fully on board, thought the idea was hilarious, wanted to make a funny film, but my dad would do anything for me. My dad loves me so much, he would do anything for me. He would throw himself under a bus, literally. So he's already ready to die for me. So can I kill him? Right? And so, that's ethical questions
So we are talking about to be or not to be. Come on. Don't bring us back to cinema. When I was a kid, I started to making photos when I was 5, 6, I already was like making photos, and then at 4 years old, before that, when I was 4, I had a like friend, little piglet, which became my best friend, and then he was killed, and for me, with drama, I became vegetarian. Then life goes on. I'm vegetarian all my life. Then I'm making photos, and then in certain moment, I became filmmaker. I start making my movie in 35 millimeter, and then suddenly I learned that the film itself made from bones of animals. So for me, it was the biggest disaster of my life, because so I remember the moment when I was a kid, I had two only desire, or to be guy who protect animals, like forestmen who protect trees and animals in the forest against guys with guns and who destroy everything, or to be filmmaker. One day at 14 years old, I decided to be filmmaker. But then I realized that film itself, 35 mil, the emulsion made from bones. And I already made Belarus. I mean, it was like disaster, catastrophe, just really disaster. So, and I didn't know how to hold it. I didn't know what to do now. So it was like, then I started to use 16 millimeter next film. I made Wednesday already, at least to
Less
reduce.
bones.
I reduced the amount of footage I made, and then digital came by luck. But when I started making GUNDA, you said, I always think art is art. I always, if I ask you why art exists, I always think like this: we have kind of holes here, like little holes here, and our art is what art is doing it to make them bigger. Exactly. Then you can cry. But not because I show you something horrible, but because I show you something beautiful you never seen before. So art helps you to feel something you normally don't experience. So when I started filming Gunda, of course I wanted to come closer to her. But from another side, I said, no, I have to treat her as if I film person. I should not push. I should not come closer. And if she is moody, because sometimes she was moody, because in couple
I wonder why.
of 100 meters away was the slaughterhouse. And when once a week they are killing animals, and it was a horrible noise. Animals were screaming so loud that Gunda was not like, it was disaster for her. She knows what is happening. So in that days, I was not able to film. I knew she is nervous, and we just make step backs. But in the last episode, this was the most crucial moment where to put camera, have to catch her emotions, and not where to put camera in order not destroy her environment, in order that she is free to go wherever she wants. But at the same time, to be close enough to see her emotion. And you don't believe me now, what I will say. And I said to my team, if we will put camera here in the corner, don't destroy her, not in her way, but she will come to us. Not we come to her, but she will come to us. And my team said, why do you know she will come to us? And I said, I don't know. My experience tells me she needs to talk to someone. And as far there is no one around, she will come to us. So the close-up, the only close-up in the film we have, we came to her with lens, but she came to us and she looked to the camera, almost saying, what the fuck are you doing with me? Why you took my kids? So it was just, Tom, thank you for raising this question of ethic and aesthetic. This job is really every single day, every single moment to put camera here, or you have to come tiny bit farther, not to disturb environment of person, or you can come closer. This is most important thing in this job.
I mean, Victor, you just gave a wonderful illustration of another question I want to ask, and we got about 10 minutes left, so maybe this can fill it. Another thing you write in your documentary rules is that you need your brain both before and after filming, but don't use your brain during filming. Just film using your instinct and intuition. It sounds like there, Victor, you were really...
Easy, my friend. It's very easy. Imagine I'm a singer. Imagine I'm a singer. I came to the stage and I think instead of Verdi, I will say, Putin is asshole, Trump is an asshole, put them both in prison. You will say, what the fuck? I need your voice. I need to feel how you are better singers than me, myself, right? You don't need me to speak to you with my ideas. You need me to show my talent, right? Same with filmmaking. You have to you need brain to choose right song, or to choose, in our case, to choose right subject and right aesthetic. But when you film, actually, you have to just use your talent, use ability to see more than normal people, to listen more than normal people, to feel more than normal people. This is our job. And this is nothing to do with brain. I believe, I will say something criminal now, forgive me, or put stones on me. I believe that greatest filmmaker of the world, Tarkovsky, spoiled his reputation by using brain too much in the last two films. He just put so much messages, so much humanistic ideas, so much knowledge, so much, and he killed cinema, in my opinion. He used to be poet of cinema, and in the last, he became like a teacher of humankind. And this is killing cinema. This I always believe. When you film, forget about your knowledge. Read a lot of books before. I read a lot of books about pigs and chicken and cow. I met great scientists before I start. But when I start filming, I block all of this and I just feel together with her. I was reading her emotions. I was looking into your two eyes of Gunda and I was trying to feel her emotions. I don't know how you guys, but this is for me crucial.
Garrett, I wonder about the role of instinct and intuition in your filmmaking on time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think to the same point, you have to be able to know something well enough that you can let go of it then, right? Like to a certain extent, I think for me, it's always important, and it was especially with time, to get to know the family, to get to know how they move through space, how they inhabit their space, so that I can my instinct is based on knowledge, and my instinct is also connected to intention that is informed. So I completely agree, and I think that translates in a literal way of like, I know what Fox's routine, I knew what her routine was while we were filming, right? So I knew how she was going to move, what her typical movements were in the office, and I was making informed decisions, on where my camera was going to be. And I think it also on a less literal level, for me, in the same way that you're speaking about like reading a book, for me, it starts with a lot of conversations. Every single project that I make, especially with time, started off with a series of conversations between myself and Fox and the family around why they wanted to make this film. What was their intention for wanting to make this film? And they said to me, our story is the story of 2.3 million American families. We feel we can offer hope. Our story can offer hope. So then for me, I felt it was my job to take the abstraction of what hope can look like and try to distill that into something that's very specific. And how does hope exist in their life? How can we see that cinematically in their life? And then the intention, because I think also with documentary, for us, it's like, it's a real practice in honoring the present. You have to honor the present moment. You can't be focused on the future, right? And so how do you honor the present moment? Something needs to be anchoring you. And I think that the anchor is the intention, and the intention for me needs to be connected with the people that I'm working with. So it all kind of lines up, and there is a bit of a chronology there that is very clear, you know, that allows you to be free.
You put your finger on it, right, Garrett? It's when one films, one is in the present. Mm-hmm. And what, you're talking about of making it with the family or making it movie with Gunda, like letting Gunda come to you, is about trust. Mm-hmm. And trust is something that is built over time and that can be like broken in an instant. And so that like, the hyper awareness in the present moment is realizing that everything's at stake. The trust can be lost. A trust that you've spent 25 years building can be lost in a moment. And, that was like, in some deep way, the high stakes of me making this film with my dad. Like, he's loved me unequivocally for 55 years. And I can blow it with this film. I can break our trust. And yet I'm trying to honor our trust by making the craziest movie I can in the service of defying his death, right? And I'm going to do everything I possibly can. But Victor, I got to tell you, I believe we are bodies. Our brains are in our bodies. Our hearts are in our bodies. Our eyes are in our bodies. And our bodies are present when we film. So I'm not taking my brain out of the picture. My brain has served me well. My brain is always active when I film, but my heart is active. My eyes are active. My body is active. And my history with in the world, but with the people I am with or the animals I am with, right? And so I'm holding all of that in my body, and I'm holding a camera, and the camera is not my body.
Finally, disagree. Finally.
So yeah, I'm just saying my brain's in my body when I'm filming.
I can tell you, it's a long way, baby. Try harder. You will come to this. Take your time.
And you know what? Like, I love that, like, someday in the future, I'll be filming and I'll think of you and I'll be like, where's my brain? I don't know where it is, right? That will happen. And I also love, like, what I love about these conversations, Tom, is that we teach each other new things about our own films. And like, Victor, you just reminded me, my father had to work in a slaughterhouse when he was a teenager. And you just made me realize, like, that's part of why my father is such a remarkable human. And I hadn't thought of it. I didn't think of it watching your movie, but now in this conversation, I think about it.
This is what is documentary about. Something you didn't thought before. You did not put on script, Tom, but bam, suddenly something happened and you catch it. This is the magic of documentary. It's unpredictable beauty. Thank you, people. This was beautiful.
Well, I think I can wrap it up there. I hope everyone gets a chance to see these films if you haven't already. Dick Johnson is Dead is on Netflix. Time is on Amazon. Gunda is available right now in the US.
Cinemas. This is interesting, Tom. Sorry, I interrupt you. This is interesting that we have this representative of three different way of cinema and Netflix and Amazon. This is already interesting. Bam! You put it specially. You wanted us to fight about it, right?
So you can watch Gunda via the Film Forum virtual cinema. We all look forward to being back in real cinemas and seeing all your films on a big screen. I want to give big thanks to our producer of Doc NYC Live, Allison Morgan. We're going to go away, but we'll be back in a half an hour talking to the directors of The Social Dilemma, 1,000 Cuts, Collective, and MLK FBI. You guys set a very high bar for these conversations. So I hope people who are watching get to watch more live today or on recordings. Thank you.
Please stay safe. Ciao, people.
Thank you, Kirsten Johnson, Victor Kosakovsky, and Garrett Bradley.
Oh.